You've been correcting people your whole life. Every time someone got you wrong, you felt this burning need to explain yourself, to clarify, to defend, to make them understand you. And you thought that was maturity. You thought that was intelligence. But what if I told you that every time you opened your mouth to justify yourself, you handed someone else the remote control to your life? What if the most powerful thing you could ever do, the single most ruthless, calculated, strategic move available to you, is to close your mouth, hold your posture, and let them misunderstand you completely? Let's start with something uncomfortable. Most people are running around this world desperate to be understood. They want approval. They want validation. They want the people around them, colleagues, family, strangers on the internet, to see them clearly, to give them credit, to recognize their value. And so they explain themselves constantly, exhaustively. They send the follow-up message. They add the context. They soften the edge. And what does that accomplish? Absolutely nothing. In fact, it does worse than nothing. It signals weakness. The moment you feel compelled to explain your decisions to people who didn't ask, you've already told them something critical about you. You've told them that their opinion of you matters enough to change your behavior. That's not strength. That's dependency wearing a suit. Think about the men and women throughout history who held real power. Think about the ones who walked into rooms and changed the temperature without saying a single word. They didn't carry a folder full of justifications. They didn't hand out explanations like flyers on a street corner. They moved in silence. They acted. They let the results do the speaking, and they let the misunderstandings stand like walls around a fortress. Because that's exactly what those misunderstandings were: protection. There's a man, a fictional one, yes, but built from the archetype of every dangerous, disciplined, self-made person who has ever walked through fire and come out colder on the other side. And his name is Thomas Shelby. If you've studied him at all, you know he never chases understanding. People think he's a monster. He uses it. People think he's reckless. He weaponizes the assumption. People think they've figured him out. That's when he's most dangerous. Because the second you think you understand Thomas Shelby, you've already lost. Now, I'm not here to tell you to become a gangster. I'm here to tell you that the psychological principle underneath that character, the absolute refusal to shrink yourself down to someone else's comprehension level, is one of the most underrated forms of personal power that exists. You've been shrinking. You've been made smaller by your own need to explain. And today, that stops. Because silence isn't avoidance. Silence is strategy. And the people who understand that are already 3 moves ahead of everyone in the room. Let's go deeper. Because the habit of over-explaining doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a wound, somewhere along the way. Maybe in childhood, maybe in a relationship, maybe in a boardroom where someone dismissed you without hearing you out. You learned that if you could just say it right, if you could find the exact combination of words, people would finally see you. And if they saw you, they'd accept you. And if they accepted you, you'd be safe. So you practiced explaining. You got good at it. You became articulate. You learned to anticipate objections and address them preemptively. You thought you were developing a skill, but what you were actually doing was training yourself to need external validation in order to feel okay about your own choices. And here's the brutal truth. Nobody is obligated to understand you. Nobody owes you comprehension. The universe doesn't come with a customer service line where you can file a complaint because someone got you wrong. People will see what they want to see. They'll interpret your silence as arrogance, or your boldness as recklessness, or your discipline as coldness. And there is nothing you can say to change a mind that has already decided. So what does it cost you to keep trying? It costs you energy. Every explanation is a withdrawal from your internal reserves. Every justification is time and mental bandwidth spent managing someone else's perception of you, instead of actually building the life you want. You're paying a tax on your own existence, and the tax collector is other people's opinions. It costs you respect. This one stings, but you need to hear it. When you over-explain, you signal to others that you don't fully trust your own decisions. And if you don't trust yourself, why should they? Confidence is not loud. Confidence is the calm, steady refusal to justify yourself to people who are not qualified to evaluate you. It costs you clarity. The more you try to explain yourself, the more tangled you become in others' narratives about you. You start editing yourself. You start second-guessing. You lose the thread of your own vision because you're too busy weaving a version of yourself that's palatable to people who will never be satisfied anyway. There's a reason that people who study Thomas Shelby psychology, not the violence, not the trauma, but the mental architecture, walk away with something. It's this: he is never lost in someone else's story about him. He has his own story, and he moves according to that story with a precision that is almost terrifying. When people misread him, he doesn't flinch. He files it away. He uses it. That's not sociopathy. That's sovereignty. And it's available to you, not through coldness, but through the deliberate, practiced discipline of releasing the need to be understood by everyone. You are not a product that needs good reviews to function. Act like it. Now let's talk about what actually happens. Psychologically, socially, strategically. When you stop explaining yourself, something remarkable occurs. People fill the silence with their own projections, and the majority of the time, what they project is bigger than what you would have offered them. Human beings, faced with incomplete information, don't assume the worst by default. They assume significance. When someone moves with quiet confidence and says little, the brain of the observer doesn't process that as emptiness. It processes it as depth, as intentionality, as someone who has access to information that others don't. In social psychology, this is sometimes called the mysterious stranger effect. People consistently attribute more intelligence, more capability, and more authority to individuals who are measured, sparse with their words, and who don't scramble to fill every silence with self-explanation. The very act of not explaining yourself tells the room that you don't need their approval to move forward, and that reads as power. Think about it from a purely practical standpoint. If you walk into a negotiation and immediately begin explaining your position, your history, your reasoning, you've shown your hand. You've given the other party a map to your thinking. Now they know where your insecurities are. They know what you're trying to justify, and they'll use that. People always do. But if you walk in with stillness, if you listen more than you speak, if you make your offer or your decision clearly and then stop talking, you become unreadable, and unreadable is unbeatable. This is something Thomas Shelby understood at a cellular level. Watch how he operates in rooms where everyone else is loud and posturing and trying to prove something. He speaks late, he speaks short, and when he does speak, it lands like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward, long after the room has moved on. That's not charisma in the traditional sense. That's the power of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to execute. You want that energy? You have to earn it. And you earn it by doing the uncomfortable work of sitting with the discomfort of being misunderstood and not fixing it. Let someone think you're cold. Let them think you're calculating. Let them think you're mysterious or difficult or complex. Because you know what? You are complex. You're a human being with layers and history and vision that most people will never be equipped to fully comprehend. That's not a flaw. That's not something to apologize for. That's the natural state of a person who is actually thinking, actually growing, actually building something, while everyone else is busy consuming entertainment and forming snap judgments. The misunderstanding is not a wound. The misunderstanding is a wall. And walls keep the wrong people out. There's also a deeper dimension to this. When you stop needing to be understood, you stop performing. And the moment you stop performing, something extraordinary happens. You become authentic, real, fully present. Because you're no longer managing a character. You're just being. And people can feel the difference between a person who is performing for approval and a person who simply is who they are, unapologetically, regardless of audience. That presence is magnetic. It draws the right people in. The ones who are intelligent enough to recognize depth, secure enough to sit with mystery, and valuable enough to deserve access to the real you. Let the others walk away confused. They were never the destination. Use what nobody is telling you. The game that most people are playing. The game of managing perceptions, of curating reputations, of crafting explanations is not the game that leads anywhere worth going. It's an exhausting, never-ending treadmill where the finish line keeps moving because other people's standards are not fixed. They shift, they evolve. What satisfies them today will bore them tomorrow. You are chasing a target that doesn't exist. The people who actually build lasting success, whether in business, in relationships, in creative work, in leadership, are not playing the perception game. They're playing the execution game. They make decisions. They act. They adjust. They build. They keep moving. And they keep moving quietly because they understand that the less noise you make about what you're doing, the more energy you have available to actually do it. Look at every high-functioning person in any industry, the ones who have actual depth, actual results, actual longevity. They are rarely the loudest people in the conversation. They're the ones who seem almost eerily calm, almost detached, almost like they exist in a slightly different time frame than everyone else. And they do, because they're not spending a single second of mental bandwidth worrying about what table they're sitting at in someone else's cafeteria. Thomas Shelby, sitting in his office making a decision that will affect dozens of lives, doesn't call a press conference to explain his reasoning. He doesn't send a memo. He doesn't gather feedback. He acts, and then he lets the results make the case. The right people see it eventually. The wrong people never will, and that's fine, because the wrong people were never part of the plan. You need to audit the game you're playing, and you need to do it honestly. Ask yourself, how much of your energy today went toward actually building your skills, your relationships, your financial position, your health, your vision, and how much of it went toward managing how you look to people who will be relevant to your life in 3 years? Be honest. The answer is probably uncomfortable, because most people, on any given day, spend more time curating a version of themselves for external consumption than they do actually investing in the real thing. They're so busy making sure they look hardworking that they don't have time to actually work hard. They're so busy making sure they seem confident that they never develop actual confidence. The image replaces the substance, and they wonder why they feel hollow. Stop playing that game, walk off that field, build something real in the quiet, away from the audience, away from the commentary. Let people misunderstand what you're doing. Let them think you've disappeared. Let them think you've given up, or checked out, or lost the plot. And then show up with the results. That's the only explanation you ever needed to give. This is where we get tactical, because everything up to this point is philosophy. Valuable, necessary, foundational. But philosophy without action is just expensive therapy. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in your life, in the real world, starting now. First, stop responding to every provocation. Not every comment needs your counter. Not every criticism needs your defense. Not every mischaracterization of you requires correction. This is going to feel wrong at first because your nervous system has been trained to respond, to protect, to clarify, to explain. But here's what you need to understand. Responding to every provocation is not strength, it's reactivity. And reactivity reveals that the other person has power over your emotional state. When someone misrepresents you, online, in a meeting, at a dinner table, pause. Ask yourself, does correcting this actually serve my goals? Or does it just serve my ego? 90% of the time it's ego. Let it go. Let the misunderstanding stand. Move on. Your actions over time will either correct the record or make it irrelevant. Second, make decisions and stop explaining them. This is especially hard for people who have been conditioned to seek consensus or approval before acting. But the habit of pre-justifying your choices before you make them is a slow poison. It invites input from people who don't have skin in the game. It dilutes your vision with noise, and it trains the people around you to expect that their opinions are required before you can proceed. Start making clean decisions. Decide, act, and if someone asks why, give them the shortest, honest answer you can and move on. You don't owe anyone a dissertation on your reasoning. Your confidence is explanation enough. Third, get comfortable with the discomfort of silence. This is a practice. When a conversation ends and you feel the pull to add one more thing. Don't. When someone looks at you skeptically and your instinct is to fill the space with reassurance, don't. Sit in the silence. Let it be there. Feel the discomfort, because that discomfort is where the growth is. Every time you resist the urge to over-explain, you're building a muscle. And that muscle, over time, becomes the most powerful thing you own. Fourth, let your work speak. Thomas Shelby doesn't announce his plans, he executes them. By the time anyone understands what he's doing, it's already done. This is not arrogance, it's wisdom. Because talking about what you're going to do before you do it disperses the energy of the intention. It trades the reality of the work for the cheap substitute of the conversation about the work. Keep your goals quieter, work harder, surface less. Let the results be the announcement. Fifth, choose your audience with surgical precision. Not everyone deserves access to your thinking. Not everyone deserves to understand your vision. Preserve your real depth, your real plans, your real reasoning for the people who have earned that access, the people who have shown up, who have demonstrated loyalty, intelligence, shared values. Everyone else gets the surface, and the surface is enough. Let them work with what they have. The important people will see the whole picture in time. This is not coldness. This is curation. It's the difference between broadcasting on every frequency and transmitting a precise signal to the people who have the right receiver. Practice these 5 things. Do them daily. Do them even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable, and watch what changes. Let's zoom out. Because this is not just about tactics. It's not just about shutting up in meetings or not texting back immediately. What we're actually talking about is the construction of a life built on internal authority rather than external permission. When you stop needing to be understood, you start something. You start the slow, difficult, deeply rewarding work of becoming someone who is moved only by their own compass. And that kind of person, someone who is genuinely self-directed, genuinely anchored in their own values and vision, is extraordinarily rare. Most people never get there, not because they're not intelligent enough, not because the circumstances don't allow it, but because they are never willing to pay the price, the discomfort of being misunderstood. Every truly great life you admire has been built by someone who was willing to look crazy to the people around them for a period of time. Every business that changed in industry was once an idea that people laughed at. Every relationship that stands the test of time was once a choice that looked inexplicable from the outside. Every personal transformation was once a behavior change that confused and alienated the people who preferred the old version. You cannot grow and be universally understood at the same time. Those two things are not compatible, because growth means moving away from where you were, and the people who only knew you there will not be able to track you here without your help, and you don't have time to carry them. This is what Thomas Shelby represents at the deepest level. Not the violence, not the ambition, but the absolute refusal to be defined by any external narrative. People around him make mistakes, get caught in other people's stories, collapse under the weight of what others think of them. He doesn't. He carries his own story, writes his own chapters, and moves forward with a relentlessness that has nothing to do with ego and everything to do with vision. That's what you're building when you stop seeking understanding. You're building sovereignty, the ability to move through life according to your own internal map, undistracted by the noise of commentary, unshaken by the discomfort of being misread. That is not isolation. That is not isolation. That is not arrogance. That is the highest form of self-possession. And the irony, the beautiful, strange irony, is that when you finally stop chasing understanding, you start attracting it. Not from everyone, but from the right ones. Because people who have done their own inner work recognize the signature immediately. They see someone who is not performing, who is not managing, who is simply being cleanly, powerfully, without apology. Those are the people worth building with. Those are the relationships worth having. And you can only reach them by walking through the valley of being misunderstood and not flinching. Walk through it. Don't explain it. Just walk. Here's where we land. Everything I've said today is only useful if you're actually building something worth being misunderstood for. Because there's a version of this that's just avoidance dressed up as strategy. There are people who don't explain themselves because they have nothing to say, who stay silent not from strength but from fear, who let misunderstandings stand not because they're playing a long game, but because they've given up on engagement entirely. That's not power, that's abdication. The kind of silence I'm talking about, the kind that Thomas Shelby embodies, the kind that every self-made, self-directed person in history has practiced, is loud on the inside. It's built on a foundation of absolute clarity about who you are, what you're building, and why it matters. The silence is strategic because there's something behind it. The refusal to explain is powerful because there's vision that doesn't need explanation. So before you go quiet, make sure you know what you're being quiet for. Make sure there's a plan. Make sure you're moving towards something real. Because misunderstood people who are also building something extraordinary, the world eventually catches up to them. But misunderstood people who are just misunderstood, with nothing behind the curtain, they just disappear. Be the former, build in silence, move in intention. Let the noise of other people's miscomprehension wash around you without pulling you off course. You know what you're doing. You don't need anyone else to know it yet. And that quiet, unshakable, forward-moving certainty is the ultimate power move. So here's what it comes down to. The most powerful version of you is not the one who has the best explanation. It's the one who no longer needs to give one. Every second you spend justifying your decisions is a second stolen from actually executing them. Let people be confused. Let them fill in the blanks incorrectly. Let the misunderstanding exist. And while they're busy forming opinions about you, you'll be busy building the life that renders those opinions irrelevant. You already know who you are. You already know where you're going. Now move like it.